It's Tuesday, May 24th, 2006, a little bit past 2 p.m., and that means it's time to have WorthPoint's Chats with Harry Rinker. I'm Greg Watkins, the editor at WorthPoint, and Harry, we had a little technical difficulties, didn't we?
Yes, and I'm not sure the technical difficulty didn't rest with Harry as opposed to the machines, but no, I've got this, I bought this new Dell computer, and it just, all of a sudden, sometimes it just stops and says, oh, there's an error, I can't save anything, shuts down, I have to get up and get reestablished. But I'm back, I'm doing the show today from Kentwood, Michigan. Now, that doesn't sound like much because we did the show last week from Kentwood, Michigan, but I've been down to Florida and back, down there, and we have, Linda and I have a getaway place down in Florida, in Altamont Springs, and while I was down there, did an appraisal, did a walkthrough appraisal. You know, I do a lot of these type of things. In fact, when the show's over today, got some people bringing a bunch of stuff by the house. I've got a discount rate if they bring it to my house. So if I don't have to go to their place, hey, a buck is a buck. But
that's right.
You know what? And I wish we could. You know what? That's almost like a good thing to say in the antiques and collectibles trade. I wish we could convince people that a buck is a buck, and a buck is better than no bucks, because if they price something too high and they never sell it, then they have no bucks. But if they price it right and they sell it, then they got bucks on top of bucks. So that's a good thing. But anyway, I went out and did this interesting appraisal this past week, and I have to tell you, it was. I looked at several dozen paintings and prints, and you know, when you're in there, and the temptation you have is to sit down at a computer and say, hey, I want to research all this stuff. But I work on what I call the pile methodology when I'm doing something like that, and that is I put the things in three piles. Pile number one, garage sale. Pile number two, worth talking to a local dealer or a consignment or an estate sale person. Pile number three, things worth researching, okay?
Yeah.
So I had about, maybe 9 or 10 signed paintings and a couple watercolors were part of it in the pile. And they were signed, and I could make out the artist's name. Now, there was one where there was an artist symbol, and I'm still working on that one. So, you know, I'm feeling really good about myself. I measured everything up and whatever. Came to the computer and started typing in the names of the artists. How many do you think I found? None.
None.
No, it's a real big issue. How do you deal with these millions of artists out there? I mean, assuming that you look at the number of paintings on people's wall that are signed by people, it's got to be in the millions. It's got to be right in the tens or hundreds of millions. And the answer is that maybe 1 out of 1,000 will have information about it. The other ones are local people and whatever. So it gets to be real tricky. That's one of the reasons, of course, why we're doing one of the courses at the Institute this summer on paintings, watercolors, and prints, and how to research them and so forth. But that aside, it was an interesting thing. And what you have to kind of do, and in a way it's like with WorthPoint and other things, you have to decide when you're looking at a pile of stuff, really, what is worth researching? What is worth your time? You know, I try to tell people when I teach, I say, how much is your time worth? You may remember I did that when you were up at the Institute last year.
That's right, yes.
How much is your time worth? Is it worth $10 an hour, $20 an hour? Well, if you work at McDonald's in New York, it's still going to be worth $12.50. But the point of the matter is, you know, if you're worth $25, $50 an hour, and you have to take 3 hours to research for something and find out it's worth $300, you lost money. So, you know, you have to kind of sense when it's there. And so what I'm doing now is going through that pile of stuff I've identified, and I'm saying how many of these paintings are worth trying to go further, because I can look at them and get them in a ballpark. And what you want to do with research is find that hidden gem, the one that you don't know about, and go for it. Well, we have a couple of interesting things in the news. We've got 2 objects that came in from some of our WorthPoint people. Why don't we talk about one of the things I've decided? I don't know why I have to decide this, because if people watching these YouTube videos, they know. I decided I want to play guru from time to time, because every once in a while somebody provides me with, says something in the trade, and I got a call. You know, I do a weekly radio show called What You Got on Sunday mornings from 8 to 10 Eastern, and I got a call from a listener who said the 50th anniversary of Matchbox is coming up, right?
Right.
You know, that's okay, that's fine. And so he said, you know, is Matchbox past its collecting prime? And And that raises all kinds of interesting philosophical questions. You know what I'm talking about? In other words, question number one: once an object is made, what's its collectible life? How long can it survive? 50 years? Can it survive 60, 70 years as an object? Well, the little red wagon, or the radio flyer wagon, is, I guess, what is it? Another year, and it's going to be 100 years old as a toy. But the problem is, you know, how many people collect it? Not a lot of people out there. So the question became, first of all, how, after an object first appears on the scene, let's take Barbie, 1959, okay? So 2009 is 50 years later, right?
Right.
You know, no. Yeah, she came in, see, 1959, so she's 50, approaching 60. Well, the question is, Barbie isn't as collectible as she once was. Now, whether that's the collector's fault or Mattel's fault, the truth of the matter is she's not, right? So you start looking at saying things, okay, 50 years from Matchbox. Well, 15 years ago, I went to Matchbox conventions and so forth in trader groups, and they were aging out at that point. Even though Matchbox is still around, is it still something that's going to be potentially collectible? But then what you have to look at, is, say, for example, Matchbox, Barbie, anything wasn't collectible the first time it came out, the first number of years, right? Now, sometimes you can get collectability within 5 to 10 years after an object's out, and with Beanie Babies, but even Beanie Babies took 2 years or 3 years to take off, right, in terms of collectability. So the question becomes, once you reach a collectability point, once you realize that people are collecting the stuff as opposed to buying it to use, how long can that be sustained? And my guess is that 50 years is a way too long a period of time. I mean, come on, look at Hopalong Cassidy, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, the Lone Ranger. They're done. You know, come on. Well, I hate to say that. Come on, I had a big Hoppy collection, and I still have a couple of Hoppy pieces. But the problem is that the generation that grew up with them is dying. And the thing about it is that, you know, Hoppy fans don't collect until they die. No, they don't. Even Beatles fans, I don't think, collect till they die, because you get to be around your late 60s, early 70s, and you start asking the question no collector should ever ask, what am I doing with all this stuff? And maybe I ought to get rid of it now. Well, by the time you ask that question, it's way too late to get rid of it because the market's gone by for it, and it's passed. But this whole issue of how long can the passion and enthusiasm for any collecting category. Now you take some of the junk like pattern glass, cut glass, depression glass. Its collecting value is a shadow of its former self. Same way with colonial revival furniture from everywhere from the 20s through the 50s. And so now I'm beginning to think maybe we should start looking at this ability and see if we can develop specific timeline guidance for this type of thing. So I'm just telling you, I'm stewing on this. It's going to be at least one, maybe more Rinker on Collectibles columns coming up in the future. And by the way, my weekly column, Rinker on Collectibles, appears on WorthPoint, right?
Yes, it does.
We get
it up there every week.
How can you read my weekly column on WorthPoint?
Well, you would go to the WorthPoint homepage and then look for one of the tabs there for news and articles, and click on the articles section. It'll take you right to the content page where your articles reside.
Right. And I hear from a lot of WorthPoint, especially when I write some of the more controversial think piece columns. And by the way, all my even number columns are what I call think piece columns, and all my odd numbers are Q&As. But speaking of Q&As, we got a couple of interesting Q&As in this week from our WorthPoint subscribers, right?
That's right.
Let's start with the Franklin Mint necklace.
Okay. Well, first let's get the address for people to send.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yes, two things. First of all, if you're watching this YouTube chat live, there is a chat message or link on the right-hand side, and you can send us a question while we're up here recording this. But if you are not going to do that, what you can do is send us your question about an object, or maybe you just have a question about the antiques and collectibles trade, to community@worthpoint.com. which we have a slide of as soon as you find it.
Well, yeah, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties again. I cannot get my slides up.
Well, isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, I'm a bull, you know water. So the whole point of the matter is we can keep talking here.
Okay. Well, you keep talking. I'm going to try and get.
All right. Now, we'll talk about the objects, and if we get them up, that's fine. And if we don't, we can still talk about them. Anyway, the place to send us is community@worthpoint.com, and we got a letter in from. Let's see here if I can. See here, I don't know. This came in from Amy. I don't know where Amy's located. We do. Yeah, she said Houston, Texas, and she has a Franklin Mint piece. It's a necklace called the Jeweled Wisteria. Now, for those of us that track the market, the word Franklin Mint just causes hackles to come up in the back of our head, as if we want to say, do we have to see one more Franklin Mint pewter chess set before we die? But the point is that Franklin Mint mass-produced things. Now, what I wanted to look up, and I apologize before that, is somehow when did QVC arrive upon the scene? But Franklin Mint back in 1981. Now, again, this is good because this comes with a certificate of authenticity. And speaking of things that raise hackles again, to anybody here, this whole business of a certificate of authenticity is usually a symbol to all of us that there's problems with it long term. These certificates of authenticity have no meaning whatsoever, none. Nor are they a value-added factor. But anyway, this one says it has a certificate of authenticity, the Jeweled Wisteria necklace by Hane, H-A-N-E, Morrig, and it's really a lovely little piece. Wisteria has 9 faceted amethysts, and it says it is further certified that the pendant was issued in a limited edition. Now look, what's limited to the Franklin Mint or anybody in limited edition? Limited just means that they made as many as they could sell. Oh, here it is. Let's look at that. It's a nice little pendant, actually. But, limited is 10 or less. Anything above that is not limited, and this was not limited. I can assure you it was not. But, so we don't know if they made 500 or a million or however many of these they made. Now, back in the 1990s, either late 1980s or early 1990s, Franklin Mint issued a book of all the things that had produced up to that point with their dates and original purchase price. Now, I know the book exists. I don't have a copy of that book in my immediate library here in Michigan, but we can find it. We might find out what this sold for originally. Now, let's talk about this thing. Franklin Mint and others took a number of artists and had them design and stuff and gave you the impression that you're buying a piece of art. No, you're buying a copy done by somebody of this artist's original drawing. Normally, you can't even find anything about this artist, but these artists. But this artist is interesting. This artist has an identifiable track record in the design community. Her name is Hane, H-A-N-A-E. Last name Mori, M-O-R-I, and she's from Japan. But what's interesting about her is she's known more for her perfumes, her designer perfumes, and her dresses than she is for her jewelry. But this was fairly early in her career. She's since passed away. So I always tell people it's always good when people die because that way they can't make anymore. So you don't have to worry about more. Now, what are you laughing about, Craig? Come on here, don't do that.
That's very cynical, Harry. But
yes,
I guess
but every time I get an autograph from somebody, I just say, I hope you drop dead when I'm done. No. But anyway, going back to this. Now, okay, so she has a bit of a track record. She did a number of pieces for Franklin Mint. Some costume jewelry, but this piece was done in 14 karat gold, and it had 9 faceted amethysts. Now, you have to understand that these are not high-quality amethysts that were used in this stuff. But the thing about it is it's a step above costume jewelry, and I happen to like the design of it, and you found this in the WorthPoint database, right?
That's right. That's right. So
And,
we had
and, with,
12,
and with a recent price, too.
yes, we had 12 hits, and the biggest one was by the same designer, Maury, went for $1,200 a couple years ago.
What did? This same piece?
No, not this one.
Right, right. And see, this is what you have to be careful about, Craig. We'll talk about that for a minute because I found that piece too in WorthPoint. It was $1,200, but it was not 14 karat gold. It was 18 karat gold. It had a heavier gold content to it. So when you're trying to look for comparables, you have to be real careful what you're comparing apples. You have to make sure you're back to apples and oranges to oranges. But here's the good news, right?
Right.
Here you can see the exact piece, and it closed at, it looks like $329.99?
Correct.
Oh, wait, that sounds like an asking price. Did that sell through? Do we know? Oh, no, it has a sold date on it, right?
Yeah, it did sell. It was February 5th, 2015.
Yeah.
So somebody wanted that
You know,
badly.
I think that's probably a reasonably accurate price. This is one of those cases where it didn't cost us new, I'll tell you that. And this is one of those cases where, because the designer is known and because it's 14K gold, there's always a gold content on it. Because it's a fairly nice looking piece as well, I think 300 to say 350 is a good place to be. I think this one sold at pretty near top market. But there it is. So we want to thank Amy for sending that in. Again, if you have an object you'd like to talk about here, send it in to community@worthpoint.com. Here you go, community@worthpoint.com. Okay?
Okay.
Well, speaking about things in the news right now, I just got the recent edition of the Main Antique Digest, the June edition, and I have to tell you something about this. People always say to me, "What trade papers should I get?" And my column appears in a number of them. And it's, I have to be real careful, about picking favorites. But I tell people, as far as I'm concerned, you need access to 3 trade papers. The first one is Main Antique Digest. That follows the high end of the middle portion of the market. The other one is either the Central or Eastern edition of Antique Week. Now, I get both, but I recommend a Central edition. And yet, even though you would think with a title like Main Antique Digest or Antique Week Central Edition that these things are regional papers, they are not. They cover the national waterfront, and that's extremely important. Very, very important. And the other one is get a strong regional paper in your area. If you're in Michigan, the Great Lakes Trader. If you're up in Wisconsin, yesteryears. If you're in some of the other areas, there's some county registers that do that. But there's good regional papers too. So if you have 3 of them, you do really well. Well, I used to be in the museum business, and I used to recruit material for that. And this story is just loaded. The University of Hartford plans to sell a political memorabilia collection. Now, if this was just any political memorabilia collection, it would be one thing. But this is one of the most important collections of political memorabilia in all of the United States. What happened is that there's only one collection better than this, and that's the one at the Smithsonian. Now, this collection consists of somewhere between 35 and 40,000 objects. They don't even have any idea of how many were in there. It was assembled by J. Doyle DeWitt and given to the University of Hartford. Now, he was, let me see, where was DeWitt? DeWitt was with Travelers Insurance. And he gave them his collection, and he worked real hard to do it. And he wrote a number of key books. 1959, A Century of Campaign Buttons. He also worked with Edward Sullivan to do American political badges and medals. By the way, you have that book. You have that book in your library down there at WorthPoint. I can tell you. Anyway, the university displayed a portion of the collection. Over the last several decades, they made several several attempts to sell it, but they backed off each time. But this time it's getting very serious. What happened was that they built a building and they set up a wing, and they had a number of items on display. And then in 2003, they had another exhibit come in, and they took the political exhibit down and never reinstalled it. So this stuff has been sitting in storage since then. Now, private collectors have come. They've talked to private collectors about buying it, but this is what I was interested in. Here, you ready for this? They contacted a bunch of organizations called the Old State House, Trinity College, Watkins Library, University of Connecticut's Dodd Research Center, Museum of Connecticut History, the National Archives, the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, the National Constitution Center, trying to find someone that would buy it. Problem: they didn't know what to ask for it, so they asked the people, make an offer. Well, nobody's going to make an offer. All right, I'll make an offer, $10. I'll buy it for $10. They're not going to take my offer. Okay, but here's the situation. This guy donated that stuff, figuring the University of Hartford would keep it forever. And they're not. Can't afford to keep it. They can't afford to house it. They can't afford to take care of it. They don't have a curator for the collection. And by gosh, they went back through the university records and found out that this guy signed a donation blank with no limits. They could use it, they could retain it, or they could get rid of it. And legally, they're in the driver's seat. Now, I work with a lot of clients that donate things to the museum, and all my clients would like the museum to display it forever. And I keep telling them, if you don't give a pile of money behind it to endow it and take care of it and house it and do everything else, it's not going to work. Well, here's a situation where you get someone who donates something to the museum, and the current curator, the current president, and the current board are all excited, and they put it on display for a while. Nobody asks what's going to happen to this stuff 20, 30, 40 years later. Now, I worked with a client that had a very important piece of folk art, and we finally got it down to the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Folk Art Collection at Williamsburg. And we did that because we know that collection is never going to get broken up. It's funded by Colonial Williamsburg. It's in a great building. It's properly temperature controlled. But many of these things that go to local historical societies, that go to universities and so forth, they're at risk. I mean, maybe in your lifetime or maybe the lifetime of kids they'll get displayed, but after that, it's there. Now, what's happened is the university has called in a couple of major sellers of political memorabilia, and they've talked to them, and they're currently negotiating. Now, you ready for this? They are willing to talk to a white knight that'll come forward and buy the whole collection and move it somewhere and donate it somewhere. I don't think they're going to be satisfied if the white knight is a dealer or someone who's going to break it up. If it's going to get broken up, they'd be smarter to break it up at auction than they would. Now, the other problem was the university says, well, we're going to keep some of the better stuff. What? You can't do that. I mean, come on, get a life. You've got to be willing to let it all go. I mean, when the puzzle collection went, man, it all went. I mean, do I have regrets? Of course I have some regrets, but the point is, it's the good stuff that attracts buyers for the other stuff. So I don't know what's going to happen to it, but it's really creating a stir up in there, and not just. And I want to thank Clayton Pennington, who is Sam's son, who is the editor. He wrote a wonderful story about this in Maine Antique Digest. I'm going to be following this too. But as you found out, there's a lot of stuff up in the newspaper accounts and all kinds of stuff. This is going to become a very difficult thing up in that area. Well,
right. There have been a lot of articles written about this issue, and outrage is in most of the headlines.
Yes.
That, the people don't want the college or the university to get rid of this collection.
Yes, well, then they should give them money to take care of it. How about that?
That's right. You can have some outrage, but if you can't back it up with some
hard, cold cash, that's right.
You're just going to sit and stew.
By the way, my good friend Lita Solis Cohen, who is, someday we'll talk about Lita Solis Cohen. She is largely responsible for my being in this business, and I owe her a great deal. Has a story in here too about Noel Barrett and Ronnie Pook joining forces. Now, Ron Pook is down in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, is one of those regional auctioneers that I have only the most enormous respect for. And Barrett was a big toy auctioneer. The problem is, if you look at their picture, they look about as ancient as I do. And so, but they're joining forces. And This is still part of an ongoing consolidation in the marketplace and auctioneering. Well, anyway, so hot news off the press there. But we have another object we want to look at yet today, so let's go to that one now.
All right.
And this is what I love. I love this type of stuff. You know, the story behind the story, right?
Right.
And what people are told. Because I'll tell you one thing. We sling so much, and I won't even comment what in this trade that is there. Anyway, one of our listeners, Brett, I believe he's located in Oklahoma, sent in this, and you can see, I'm trying to find someone who can give me any information on this old photo of a crying Native American child. The frame is 8.5 by 10.5, and the image is 6 by 8. Now, 6 by 8, remember the 6 by 8 for me, okay?
Okay.
The gentleman who owns this photograph told me his great aunt gave it to him in the early to mid 60s, and she had told him she had it for 40 years at that point. So that's all. If that's all accurate, it make the photo around 100 years old. No, it doesn't make the photo 100 years old. All right. If she gave it to him in the 60s and she had it 40 years, that takes it back to the 1920s. Well, I guess. Yeah, 1920s. Okay, so it's 2016. So, okay, maybe it's almost 100 years old. But, I mean, really. Okay, but you have to be real careful with that kind of logic. Now, supposedly what makes this image unique is the fact that it captured a crying Native American child. Okay, which he then says is very rare. Who said so? I mean, I went up on the internet and did a search of crying Native American children. I found a couple images of a number of them, not that rare. But the owner of the photo showed it to the head of the Oklahoma Historical Society 30 years ago, and he said he just didn't see images of crying Native American babies. Well, obviously he didn't look on the internet. Maybe he looked where he should have looked. Anyway, the child is believed to be Navajo. Now I don't know how you can identify that on the costume. You know, strangely enough, a lot of the pictures of Native American kids, even some of the crying ones, are Sioux and the Northern Plain Indians. So, okay, let's assume he's Navajo. I did find a couple of images of kids that look like him. Now, in the back, on the back of this, there was some writing, and it said, no, that's the back. Oh, there it is. It said Walker. It looks like one and a half.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me.
And $35. Okay.
Yes.
So I suspect that $35 means that somebody was trying to get that for it, and I suspect the Walker is not. I couldn't find any photographer by the name. I mean, I looked everywhere, and so I think the others are some kind of a code. But let's go back to those pictures you had of the back. Okay, and yeah, there you go. What interests me is the framing technique here. You see those nails, those flathead nails?
Yes.
On there? That was a framing technique that was very popular at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, you know me, when I analyze any of this stuff, I look at every side and everything in there and ask what I know about it in terms of that, okay? So let's go back to the image itself. What do I think we have here? Well, first of all, I think it's a stock photo, although in fairness, I didn't find any on the net in the time I spent trying to research. But what it looks to me like it should date from around 1905 to 1920. You remember those pictures of Cupid asleep and Cupid awake?
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
So what happens is this looks very much in that turn of the century, images, stock images, and 6 by 8 is a stock size. It wasn't 6 by 8 wasn't a standard print size for photographers. It was the standard print size for stock images that were framed up and put on the wall. Now, I'm not sure why you would put this on the wall. Certainly no Native American probably did. But but it's cute and it's got kind of a fun appearance to it. And let's assume it dates from the teens or 20s, which I think it could very well be. I didn't find other comparables to it. It looks like it, this is one of the things when people send us images, we're a little concerned because I'm not sure this is the exact color of the image, or it may be faded. It looks over white to me. I would think it has a more sepia tone in real life. But what's its value knowing only what we know about it now. And this is one of those things in the antiques and collectibles trade we're faced with quite a bit, is what is value based on what you know? Because the more you know, obviously, the more something is worth. If we knew who the photographer was, the value would shoot up. If we knew who the child was, that would, and the tribe, that would shoot it up even more. I think you're looking at somewhere probably, I think the $35 on the back is good. And we have to look at another thing. It's currently in Oklahoma. Could it bring $50 to $65 from one of the Western collectors in Oklahoma? Probably. If they could identify the tribe from the dress, and that may be difficult, that could increase it more. Do I think it's worth over $100 in any case? Probably not. But I don't think it's a $10 garage sale item either. Somewhere between $65 and $85 in Oklahoma, maybe a little bit more. Now, if this was up in Michigan, where I live, $20. Who would care up here?
Yeah. Yeah, here's a question for you, though, Harry.
Smart picker from the south would pick it and take it down there and sell it for more than it's worth.
Right.
Right.
Is trying to date this, I noticed that this looks like it's a safety pin.
Yep.
Holding his shirt together. I don't know when safety pins were first developed.
Well, long before then.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think the size of it, the image, the framing of it, all indicate to me the first quarter of the 20th century. All right?
Yeah.
And so it becomes now, what is it worth other than that? The other thing is, again, if this is faded, if the image is faded and that's causing the white look as opposed to whatever, then that will affect the value as well. The good news is I didn't find it offered as a repro photo anywhere. So he's probably dealing with the period photograph. How scarce is it? Because I don't like using the word rare. It's probably got some limited availability, but then you'd have to find the right person for it too. Which reminds me then, that allows me to put the plug in again for my Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles. We're going to be doing one of the 3 courses this summer at the Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles. The first one is Researching Antiques and Collectibles. 2 days on that, and that will deal with paintings as well. But on the 13th and 14th, we're doing 2 full days on paintings, watercolors, and prints. How do you identify them? What are they? Where do the value comes from? We're going to have a real set of exercises with that. And the final 2 days, toys, games, and puzzles. I don't care if you come to the final 2 days or not, because I'm just going to go play with my toys anyway. But anyway, you can find information about the Institute on my website, harryrinker.com. Information's up there. The registration form is up there. If you'd like to learn a lot about this, and Greg, you were at the classes last year. You know how much depth we go into in those 2 days. I mean, we work hard at it.
That's right.
And Greg will end as we always end here. What's new at WorthPoint?
Well, we launched our new newsletter last week, and
yes, we talked about that. It's up and available now.
Yes. So I think maybe we need to get you subscribed, Harry, so you can get it when it comes out.
Hopefully it has some stuff in it that I wrote.
It does. It's got an article that you wrote about collecting vinyl records again. That they're becoming trendy.
Oh, hey, by the way, since I wrote that article, speaking of vinyl records, I turned on TCM. Guess what they're doing? They're selling machines that play 33 1/3 and 78s again, and they're now selling record players to play them on TCM. I'm astonished.
Are you? Well,
yeah.
I got a turntable a couple years ago that play 33 1/3, 78s, and 45s, and the interesting thing, or the cool thing, is you can plug it into your computer and record your records.
Oh, wunderbar. But okay, but that's good. But anyway, so the newsletter's out there, and again, how do they get it? How do they find the newsletter?
Okay, so to subscribe to the newsletter, you go to worthpoint.com and you go to one of the article pages. On every content page that has an article or the list of all the articles, there is a set of boxes that you can put in your name and your email address, and just fill that out and click enter, and you'll be on the mailing list. And so right now we're going to be sending out the Insider every other week, and we have plans to develop different newsletters based on different topics. So if you're interested in marks and how to use marks. We're developing a newsletter that'll go out a couple times a week for that, or a couple times a month. We'll have newsletters highlighting upcoming auctions and interesting items that are going to be up for auction, or things that have just sold that are of interest also. So,
well, Greg, I got to say goodbye because Santa Claus is coming today to my house. Now, people
really,
ask me what my life is like, and I say it's Christmas every day because I get to unwrap strange packages and so forth. And somebody is, in a few minutes, is bringing a bunch of stuff by they want me to look at. So I get to play with some more. So, maybe next week we'll let you know what Santa brought.
That'll be fun. Okay. Well, until next week, Harry, we'll say goodbye.
All right. Thank you very much. And good to see everybody. Don't forget to send us those questions.